Listen, my mom works in an office and I feel strongly about anything related to injustice at work. This isn't just a story for use as real experience wrapped up in a fictional scenario. We don't use real names or companies. The main thing is for you to recognize yourself in this and not repeat other people's mistakes.
The first time I saw her, she was balancing an iced matcha in one hand and pointing at my console with the other. "What's that thing? Looks like it belongs in a museum," she said, laughing like I hadn't just watched her misidentify a live job queue for a deprecated test stub. I didn't respond. Just minimized the terminal and nodded once. No emotion, no comment. That's how I'd survived at CivTech for 7 years, longer than any engineer they'd ever kept. But I knew the second she mispronounced Corebridge that my time was up. She'd been hired to modernize infrastructure, which apparently meant bulldozing anything not built in the last 18 months and replacing it with flavor-of-the-week architecture that looked good on pitch decks. Her slides were pretty, full of buzzwords. DevOps, microservices, serverless edge computing. She tossed them around like glitter at a tech conference, and none of it meant a damn thing when the grid hit peak hours and milliseconds started costing 7 figures. Look, before we go further, I need you to do one thing, just one. If you're still listening, if any part of this already feels too familiar, tap that subscribe button and like the video. It's a tiny thing, but it helps more than you know. Keeps stories like this alive. Keeps our team building more of them. Anyway, back to the disaster. Brielle's first order of business was a mandatory audit of legacy systems. That was code for my code. She brought in a team of fresh grads who tore through my repositories like kids with scissors in a library, commenting useless questions into production-critical files and stripping out security wrappers they didn't understand. One even tried to recompile Corebridge without the vendor hooks active. Crashed the staging environment. I patched it. Quietly. No thanks. A week later, Brielle called me into her glass fishbowl of an office. Said I wasn't being collaborative enough. Told me she needed adaptive thinkers who can pivot fast. I asked her if she'd ever tried pivoting while 10,000 automated trades hit your pipeline at 4 a.m. on a Friday during an ERCOT pricing event. She laughed. "Come on, it's not that sensitive." She had no idea, and I wasn't going to explain it to someone who'd never written a persistent locking mechanism from scratch. I went home that night and pulled out the folder, the one I hadn't looked at in 4 years. Severin Systems LLC, my consultancy, the one CivTech had signed a licensing agreement with back when they begged me to onboard Corebridge in the first place. Most of them had forgotten. They thought I was staff. I never corrected them, because I didn't need to own the org chart to own the infrastructure. 2 days later, she stood up in the Monday sync and said, "We'll be sunsetting legacy modules. All team leads are expected to contribute to the migration plan. No exceptions." I didn't raise my hand. I didn't blink. I just started backing up my private repo logs and transferring my vendor access credentials to cold storage. Not because I was scared, because I knew what was coming. Brielle wasn't going to phase out my code. She was going to delete it. And when she did, everything would come down with it. They came in like locusts. 20-something engineers with MacBooks covered in startup stickers, popping into my Git branches like they were cracking open soda cans. Every hour, I'd get a diff alert with lines highlighted in red. Refactored for clarity, removed legacy wrapper, simplified conditional path. Which was cute, until one of them wiped a dependency chain that authenticated internal admin actions during multi-region trade spikes. I fixed it. Silently, like I always did. But they didn't stop. Brielle had given them a green light to clean up. They took that to mean rewriting battle-tested protocols as if GitHub stars mattered more than uptime. One guy tried converting the rate limiter into a Node.js microservice. The entire queue choked under load simulation and took down our dev pipeline for 3 hours. I patched it. Again. No thanks, no acknowledgement. Just an emoji in Slack. That's when she called me in. Glass walls, ergonomic furniture, one of those minimalist desks with no cables showing, and a scented diffuser puffing bergamot into the air like it could neutralize the stench of arrogance. She didn't look up at first, just swiped through something on her tablet and gestured to the chair across from her. "So, you've seen the roadmap." I nodded once. "We're migrating by Q3, full re-architecture. You'll need to start porting your modules, or, if you prefer, document them for transition." I sat back. "Brielle, CoreBridge has live licensed vendor hooks and regulator-specific callouts. You remove a single endpoint without mapping it, and we're not just down. We're in violation. She smiled like I was a child explaining why Santa still mattered. We'll sandbox it first. You've got backups, right? I looked at her for a long moment, then leaned forward, elbows on knees. Just make sure legal's on board before touching anything named CoreBridge. That got her attention. The name rang a bell, but not loud enough. She narrowed her eyes. Why? Because it's under clause control, I said. She scoffed. Please, it's code, not property. I didn't correct her. That wasn't my job anymore. She waved a hand. Look, this isn't personal, but we need to modernize. Your architecture's dated. You've done good work, but now we're building for scale. Scale, I echoed. Got it. HR will reach out next week about role transitions. We'll keep you looped in on the migration. I nodded. Once. Just once. Then stood. On my way out, I glanced at the dry erase board behind her. A flowchart. Half done. Circles and arrows labeled Core Data Sync and New Auth Bus. No CoreBridge, not even a placeholder. They didn't know what they were gutting. I walked back to my desk, popped in my earbuds, and spun up a clone of the production environment into a sealed backup archive. Then I checked my clause logs. Severin Systems, IP license dated 2018, still active. Clause 8.2d, unauthorized deletion nullifies deploy rights. All I had to do now was wait. Friday, 4:03 p.m. Just as I was finishing a review comment about a patch that would have saved them 2 months of reconciliation bugs, my screen froze. Browser timed out. Then the IDE blinked twice and shut itself. I refreshed Slack, and there it was. Your session has expired. Please contact your administrator. A second later, my phone lit up. DevOps admin. I picked up. Hey, he said, voice low. I got an email from Brielle. She said, you were done. Sorry, I didn't know. I didn't answer right away, just stared at the monitor. Nothing felt surprising. It was all so predictable, textbook even. He added, she had me revoke all access, full repo permissions, you're off the ACL now. Thanks for the heads up, I said, and ended the call. Then came the Slack all hands ping, which I still had open on my phone thanks to the mobile app. Brielle in her usual chipper corporate tone. Exciting day, we've sunsetted legacy modules and officially launched our new engine build. Thanks to the team for all your hard work. CivTech is now fully future-facing. I sat back in my chair and read it again. Sunsetted. That's what she called it. She deleted CoreBridge like it was a cluttered calendar invite. No offboarding, no handoff, no legal review, just Keyterrell plus A, delete. I didn't panic, didn't scream. I smiled. It was done. I unlocked my desk drawer, pulled out the sealed envelope I'd prepped the night Brielle first said the word modernize, and slid it open. Inside, the contact card from Omnicore's VP of Infrastructure. We'd met at a conference. She'd seen my panel on real-time trade architecture and said, if CivTech ever forgets what you're worth, call me. I dialed the number. A single ring. Omnicore. Lana speaking. Hi, this is Mark Severin, I said calmly. I'll take that offer. She didn't hesitate. We start Monday. 30 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. Blocked number. I answered. Mark? It was Tom, the CEO. Where's our core architect? I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. The acoustic tiles looked the same as they did 7 years ago when I first spun up the original trade queue, back when they needed me more than they needed a shiny new pitch deck. I didn't answer. Just let the silence stretch. On the other end, I could hear voices in the background, someone swearing, another voice asking, what does this error mean? A third person, did we just lose Tokyo? I hung up. That's the thing about legacy code. You don't just delete it, you exercise it carefully, with reverence, with transition plans, and definitely with a signed release agreement from the person who owns it. But Brielle hadn't even asked who owned it, and now the engine was gone. Along with every trade route, every auth sync, every regulator-aligned compliance log. All the stability she took for granted, she just flushed it. For what? Cleaner code comments? I shut my laptop, stood up, and walked out. Didn't even bother turning off the light. Monday morning opened with a storm. The dashboards were blank. Trade routes failed to resolve, authentication loops stalled out across all regions. Japan and Germany went into timeout hell. The compliance audit logs, normally time-stamped to the millisecond, showed blank fields or, worse, fields referencing modules that no longer existed. CoreBridge hadn't just powered a few functions. It was the spine. And now the whole skeleton had been yanked from a living, breathing system. They tried to soft patch. IT panicked and rolled back to Friday's last working commit, but Brielle's team had already overwritten the repo. The latest commit? A Frankenstein's monster of broken references, incomplete service wrappers, and swagger docs that linked to nothing. The system couldn't even compile, let alone deploy. The Slack was a war zone. One dev dropped a message that went unanswered for 3 hours. Can someone explain what null type in async bridge engine means? No one could. Support tickets began piling in, client APIs failing to handshake, cron jobs misfiring, security watchdogs firing off false positives. The worst of it came from compliance, a halt request from an external audit partner. They flagged the lack of traceability on trade logs post-deployment. That meant fines, investigations, and possibly decertification in 2 markets. But the death knell didn't come from engineering or compliance. It came from legal. Someone opened a ticket titled simply, IP status, Severin departure. The attached PDF was damning. Exit paperwork, unsigned. HR had scheduled the meeting for the following Tuesday. Brielle's shortcut had skipped it. Worse, CoreBridge source headers still referenced an active dual license under Severin Systems LLC, Clause 8.2d in plain text. Any modification, deletion, or redeployment of proprietary licensed code without written transition nullifies deployment rights and is subject to revocation of platform license access. Tom, the CEO, reportedly stood up during the emergency meeting and said one word, "What?" Legal followed with 4 more. He wasn't an employee. Silence. Brielle tried to explain that she assumed the code had been absorbed years ago, that no one told her it was vendor licensed, that if it was really that sensitive, someone should have said something. But someone had said something. I had. Right in her office. Make sure legal's on board before touching anything named CoreBridge. She scoffed then. She wasn't scoffing now. They hadn't just fired a developer. They deleted a vendor asset mid-flight with no transition, no copy, no release form. And now the license was gone. One engineer tried to suggest a rebuild from scratch. He was told flatly, that would take 6 months minimum. Another suggested buying time by rolling forward the failed microservices. Brielle said yes. They tried. The system buckled even harder. By noon, their biggest partner in Singapore paused all integrations. By 2 p.m., another threatened legal action for breach of SLA. And by end of day, CivTech's entire compliance pipeline was frozen. The engine wasn't missing. It had been erased, along with their rights to use it. The patch frenzy started before dawn Tuesday. They spun up every backup node, resurrected ghosted Docker containers from deprecated sandboxes, and even tried porting over segments from dev environments 2 years stale. Nothing clicked. One module would initialize, then throw permission errors, another would boot fine, but crash once external routing kicked in. They even tried reintroducing a partial fork of CoreBridge someone had cloned for testing last year. It compiled, but it didn't know where the clients lived, because I hadn't told it. They called Julia first, one of the original middleware devs I trained. She listened patiently, then said, I'm under NDA. Severin LLC owns my consulting clause. You'll need permission from them. Then she hung up. They called Mike, offered double his old rate. He asked if the license was still valid. When they hesitated, he said, then I'm not touching it. Panic crept into every department. Integration teams stopped taking calls. Clients were furious. SLA penalties started triggering like dominoes. $250,000 per missed hour per region in some cases. Germany suspended 3 contracts. Singapore paused all live trades. The US East node crashed every 4 minutes. The load balancer never recovered. Auditors arrived early. Too early. Word had gotten out that CoreBridge had been deleted without protocol, and within hours, regulatory investigators were crawling through version logs. One flagged a deletion event with no accompanying release or rollback plan. The report used the phrase, gross systems negligence. That one stuck. The compliance queue, once a sleek machine of self-documenting logic and timed archiving, backed up so badly that an entire fiscal week was marked incomplete. That had never happened. Not in 6 years. Every fix pointed back to the same unspoken truth. They had erased a system they didn't own, maintained by people they didn't understand, built with architecture they didn't value, until it was too late. Brielle called a sink. It was a train wreck. We need to reconstruct the pipeline, just modularize the trade routes and rebuild in layers. Someone asked, "Using what specs?" She blinked. Silence. A junior engineer quietly muttered, "Those were in the Corebridge comments." Then the COO, normally the loudest, most bullish voice in the room, raised a hand. A simple question. "Wait, did we ever confirm code ownership before deleting it?" No one answered. He looked around, first at legal, then at HR, then finally at Brielle, whose eyes stayed fixed on the table. "Seriously, did anyone verify the clause terms on that engine before she purged it?" Legal finally spoke. "We assumed it was internal IP. There was no update from HR on the vendor file." "That's because HR never filed the exit paperwork," someone whispered. The room sank under its own weight. One by one, departments realized what had happened. Compliance couldn't move, IT couldn't restore, and engineering couldn't rebuild. Because all of them had relied on a scaffold none of them controlled. They had moved fast and broken everything. The moment Clause 8.2d surfaced, the tone inside CivTech shifted from panic to dread. Buried in a red folder scan from Legal's 2018 archives, under a long-expired Dropbox link labeled Legacy Partnership Frameworks, the clause sat like a landmine no one thought to defuse. Simple language, surgical in its clarity. Unauthorized modification, deletion, or replacement of proprietary engines without written transition and transfer of IP nullifies existing operational licensing. There it was. No tech jargon, no ambiguity. Just a contract written by a younger me who'd learned the hard way that vendor meant nothing without teeth. They were in breach. No handshake would fix it now. The moment they deleted Corebridge, without transition documents, without a formal offboarding, without a licensing transfer, they'd vaporized their right to run it. 10 business days. That's all they had to negotiate reinstatement before Clause 8.2d triggered full termination of platform deploy rights. Not just for CivTech's main engine. All 3 environments built on my framework. Civ Trade, Civ Audit, and Civ Secure. By day 2, their compliance firm froze renewals. No new certs, no audit confirmations, no traceability guarantees. Their fiscal pipeline, already paralyzed, now faced decertification by quarter's end. By day 3, clients noticed. 2 major partners issued formal breach notices. One requested emergency termination without penalty, citing systems instability and regulatory noncompliance. By day 4, an investor called for a special audit. They wanted to know who greenlit the platform purge. They wanted Brielle's name. And they wanted answers on why their flagship architecture was now a legal liability with a rapidly approaching nuclear deadline. That morning, I was in a meeting at Omnicore, helping reroute a real-time fault-tolerant system for their energy forecasting model, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number, text only, from Brielle. "Can we talk?" No punctuation, no apology, no context. I stared at the message for a moment. Imagined her in that glass office, the one she'd filled with inspirational quotes and startup books she never read. Wondered if the diffuser was still running while the floor caved beneath her. I didn't reply. Didn't need to. Because the next clause in the contract said it best. Failure to respond to reinstatement notice within 10 business days shall be interpreted as a final refusal, subject to damages. And I had documentation for everything. Version logs, commit trails, access revokes, email chains, even my Slack transcript from the day DevOps locked me out. She'd wanted a clean slate. Now she had one. Wiped. Legally. Permanently. And unless they came back to my table, on my terms, that blank slate would stay blank. Omnicore's onboarding packet arrived with zero ceremony and a lot of precision. NDA, access credentials, VPN token, one internal memo welcoming M. Severin, Senior Systems Architect, and noting my domain authority for back-end architecture reviews. I logged in Monday morning just after 9. No cake, no fanfare. That's how I liked it. By 9:50, I'd already reviewed the proposed data schema for their energy allocation model and flagged 3 inefficiencies. By noon, I had restructured 2 data bridges, reducing API latency by 38%. My new team pinged me once in Slack. Wow, that was fast. I replied with a thumbs up emoji and kept working. Meanwhile, over at CivTech, they were drowning. Brielle had gone quiet, completely off Slack, off calendar. Internally, I imagined they were rebranding her disappearance as focus time. But the board knew better. Investors had started asking questions. 2 clients were threatening arbitration. And no one could explain how their core trading architecture disappeared overnight, with no plan, no backup, and no legal fallback. That's when they reached out. Not to me, to my attorney. The email arrived mid-morning, formal, tense, desperate in its restraint. Would Severin LLC consider reactivating legacy licensing under a modified scope of use? My attorney, a calm man with a memory like a filing cabinet, didn't flinch. He drafted the reply with the same icy precision I'd used building the original scaffolding. Our client is open to reinstatement discussions under the following conditions: full arrears, payment for licensing gap, effective from breach date. Reinstatement fee, calculated against platform downtime and SLA penalties incurred by client operations. A signed acknowledgement of Clause 8.2d and its applicability. Offer valid for 5 business days. No room for bartering. No apology clause, just the facts, the price, and the clock. They responded within hours. Agreed, grudgingly, but agreed, because at that point, they didn't have leverage, they didn't have CoreBridge, and they didn't have anyone who could rebuild it in under 9 months. And the reinstatement fee? It matched my entire annual compensation before they wiped me out, plus damages, calculated by a third-party neutral firm. Suddenly, the name they ignored in team meetings was showing up in budget line items with 6 zeros behind it. They still didn't speak to me directly. But Brielle's silence said everything. She'd underestimated how deep the architecture ran, how wide the licensing clause reached, and how quietly I'd built a name powerful enough to walk out the door and still own the room. The boardroom lights reflected off polished glass and nervously shuffled printouts. Everyone was muted on the call at first, just the shuffle of papers, the occasional throat clear, and the CFO's tired breathing over the speaker. Then he spoke. Slide 1 clicked onto the screen. System instability source, CoreBridge removal. Slide 2, operational breach of Clause 8.2d. Slide 3, vendor reinstatement cost, 3.7 M plus penalties, projected Q2 impact. The numbers hung there, quiet as a confession. No spin, no excuses. Just failure, quantified and time-stamped. The CEO leaned forward, his voice low but sharp. Brielle, you deleted it? She straightened in her chair, clearly prepared with some PowerPoint-polished rationale. It wasn't deletion, it was replatforming, a technical modernization initiative approved by legal cut in, calm, precise. The moment she purged that engine without a signed IP transition, she voided operational access. The platform was under a dual license vendor clause. Mr. Severin warned her, in writing. The room stilled. The CEO blinked. He warned you? Brielle opened her mouth, closed it. Legal added, we confirmed the time-stamped Slack transcript and the signed Severin Systems license. It's enforceable. She was aware. The chairman pinched the bridge of his nose. Why didn't this trigger a legal review before changes were committed? Legal replied flatly, because Brielle greenlit direct edits without process. She pushed her own team's commit to production. The override bypassed risk protocol. Brielle tried to jump in again. That protocol was outdated. Clearly it wasn't, the CFO said, not looking at her. Then someone noticed. Lower corner of the Zoom screen. My name. Blinking quietly. Mark Severin, observer. No camera, no mic, no wave. Just presence. They'd invited me, at legal's insistence, to acknowledge receipt of the reinstatement terms. No discussion, no gloating, just documentation. The CEO glanced toward the screen, then looked away. He cleared his throat, tried to salvage composure. So, we're reinstating access. We've agreed to the payment terms. Legal confirmed. Funds are processing. Clause 8.2d, compliance will be reestablished upon confirmation. Then, in the silence that followed, the COO asked a simple question. What's the plan if he doesn't agree to extend support after that? Legal didn't answer. They all knew the answer. There was no plan. They'd bet everything on a clean slate and erase the one person holding the original blueprint. Now I was back, not in person, not with noise, just a quiet name in the corner, watching, remembered, unmistakable. The resignation came as a Friday evening ping from legal. Please note, effective immediately, Brielle Carter is no longer with CivTech Solutions. No ceremony, no send-off, just a corporate obituary disguised as a calendar update. Monday, the CEO circulated a memo to the remaining leadership. It was short, 3 paragraphs. The middle one said, "Let this serve as a reminder that institutional knowledge isn't just historical, it's operational. We must honor the systems that hold us together." I'd built that sentence 3 years ago into a training manual. Now it was gospel. Omnicore, meanwhile, was thriving. Their engineering blog published a short post titled Building on Stability Platform Architecture Powered by Severin Systems. Just one screenshot, a latency graph diving like a roller coaster after I reintroduced some of my old caching logic. No names mentioned beyond mine. No context offered, just the results. Back at CivTech, they started mopping up. I wasn't watching, at least not actively, but the breadcrumbs made their way to my inbox anyway. A few quiet messages. A forwarded deck someone thought I should see. Then, one afternoon, a clean note from their new interim tech lead. Subject: Legacy Scaffolding. Hi, Mark. We're beginning phased migration back to core bridge structure. Honestly, thanks for the documentation. It still runs better than anything we built post-rewrite. Minimal refactoring required. Cleanest logging we've ever had. Appreciate what you built. Just thought you should know. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. The code was still doing what it was always meant to do. Hold a system together long after the ones who dismissed it had walked out. That's what real architecture is. Not the stack you pitch in a boardroom, the one that survives after you're gone. I never raised my voice, never leaked a memo, never gave them the satisfaction of a public takedown, because I didn't have to. They tore themselves down by ignoring the one thing they thought was replaceable. Me. But it was never about me, it was the system, and it remembered who built it.